Welcome to the Road to Dynasty Core 4 playoff previews with Joey Schneider and Chandler Maples, two of our very own managers in this Core 4 league. Chandler, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you, Joey?
Oh, doing well. It's that time of year again where the fantasy playoffs, they're come around, go around. We're week 14, so pretty much 3/4 of the games are wrapped up now in the NFL season, and this is where things get exciting. Teams get potential to clinch, and even more so for the players that are involved on fantasy teams, because now, this isn't like their Super Bowl quite yet. But for us who are just the managers and loving the football games for the matchups, this is starting to turn into our playoff and Super Bowl. So plenty to go through from there. So right now we're in, just to explain a little bit, an 8-team league. So 4 of the teams we have qualified for playoffs. Chandler and I are among 2 of them, and then we'll just take a look at the other ones in there real quickly. We've got Maloney facing me once again, and then Chandler is playing Chase Thomas. And I'm not gonna lie to you, these are matchups that could go either way. I mean, I think the 4 teams that are in here right now are about as pretty even as you're going to get for fantasy teams and overall potential and ceilings and pretty much anything that you can look at there.
I think even at the end, we should dive into the 2 consolation matchups, since it does matter how they finish in our league. So we can look at those at the end. That way they don't feel left out, since they do matter to us.
Absolutely. And just to give those 4 shout out real quickly, you've got Tyler Schumacher, Tyler O'Hare, both of them from the Kansas City area. We've got Patrick Arch from Ohio, and then we got Cody Riddle, who is living in South Carolina. I think that's where he grew up too right now. So, all over, like I said, once again, from where this brings everyone. But first, let's dive into the big matchups. Let's go with Chandler's in particular, looking at the 1 versus the 4 seed. So we've got the Commissioner as his team name versus Game of Jones, the Game of Thrones spinoff right there. I even took some notes for this one because I was really intrigued with really just a lot of facets of this. And I think a lot of it is going to come down to just the big weeks, who has the big weeks ahead, and which players are playing for a lot of keepsakes at the end right here. Because if you got a player that's out of playoff contention or starting to kind of get that way with their teams, they might get sit out in a couple of weeks. Who knows? They might limit their playing time a little bit more. But when you get teams that actually have playing meaningful games, that's when you're going to maximize their points right there. And I think right now, if you look at both of these, both Chandler and Chase, I'll let you speak on your team a little bit. You can make the argument that both of your teams still have a lot to play for the players that are in your lineups right now.
Joey, I don't know how to feel about my team, to be honest. I keep having turnover at running back every week. The ones I play, it hurts. Antonio Gibson, who's been basically my number 1, I've got Derrick Henry, so he's been my number 2 running back all year. He goes down with turf toe this week. So that shuffles things around where I might be starting 2 to 3 new starters. I don't usually start Dobbins. He might have to start. I like how Taylor's starting to look, so he's probably going to be in for sure. But it's going to be something. But I'm excited, and I'm got a text here from an insider that says Chase Thomas still sucks. So I do have that going for me. And even if I lose, Chase Thomas will still suck. So I feel good either way because I'm not Chase Thomas.
There you go. And honestly, if I'm looking at it right now with Chase Thomas being in the number 1 seed, his team's been good all year. Only had 2 losses, both of them, without trying to brag to my own tour too much, both of them coming to me in different weeks. I think there might be, and to some extent, a little bit of pressure for him to play the matchups games a little bit right now, make sure that he's got the players in the right spots. Now, I would say at least for his running backs and wide receivers, probably not as concerned with that as much as some of the other positions. Jones, Kamara, the last 4 or 5 weeks have been averaging 15 plus. Metcalf, Jefferson, Hill, is wide receivers, and one of them in the flex spot too. All of them are like in the top 10 of their position right now, averaging pretty consistently 15 plus a week. So And they also have a lot to play for too. Jefferson, really one of the surprise stars on his team right now. I think a lot of that too. Metcalf keeps getting points; they keep adding up. I mean, when you look at this team, it's definitely going to get points. It's just a matter of is it going to go beyond and above their projections, or they just want to kind of hit a floor and then stop from there, which is what I think makes his team pretty interesting in this one right now.
You know what scares me the most about this matchup being Chase's opponent? Can you do everybody a favor and tell me who does DK Metcalf play this week?
Dun, 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 dun. The New York Jets, 0-12.
And I'm pretty sure I could go for 2 touchdowns and 100 yards on the New York Jets, and I'm no DK Metcalf, so that could be a 40 burger just waiting to happen. So that I'm not a big fan of that. But what can you do? The Jets will be the Jets.
The Jets will be the Jets. Well, for what it was worth, although, it didn't really help out the Oakland's production, Oakland, Las Vegas's production last week when they played the Raiders, but they gave them a match to play for at the end. So maybe that works kind of both ways where teams come in and maybe they're playing a little bit down against them and need to increase the effort a little bit, or maybe it just whenever they're scoring points against the Jets, it goes the other way. So really from that, there's not much of a win-win situation. You just know you're probably going to get points out of that, and you just got to hope that it's not too many. But
Hopefully it's a lock-it game, and they get ahead early and just run the ball, and that limits DK. And I'll settle for like 12 points. A 12-point DK day would be perfect for me.
Absolutely. You could probably, to some extent, argue the same if you can kind of get Jefferson and Hill and Diggs to maybe kind of get near that 12.2. Their projections are a little bit higher than that right now, and rightfully so because they're all within about the top 10 range for wide receivers. But with all of them kind of getting mixed in, I mean, you're going to probably have some that are probably getting up to like 20s, 30s. Depends on how many touchdowns they get, too. I mean, I know Hill's been on a tear with some of the touchdowns he had recently. That game against Tampa Bay. Jefferson is starting to set some records for rookies of the Vikings. So in the passing game right now, dominating that. Let's look aside from the running backs and wide receivers. And I think that you're playing a lot more strategy with who you're choosing in some of these positions than Chase, perhaps. And the quarterback, for one, which is kind of different. But, like, even your special teams to an extent, too. We've got a defensive player, a defense, and a kicker. And I think all of them this week are definitely in situations where they can thrive.
I was talking about starting quarterback. I have not officially named a starting quarterback for this week yet. I have Herbert and Josh Allen, both who have been great. Herbert coming off a pretty terrible week, though, but he is facing Atlanta, and Atlanta allows points to everybody. My other option is Josh Allen against Pittsburgh, who doesn't allow points to hardly anybody, but you can't go wrong with the rushing upside of Josh Allen. But that decision will be made later in the week by the manager myself. No official word yet on who my starting quarterback will be. I stashed Seattle last week, Seattle defense, because I saw that Jets matchup coming. And I was like, I could use that one round one of the playoffs. And shout out best kicker in the league right now, Younghoe Koo. He should have stuck with the Patriots, but he is thriving in Atlanta and has honestly been one of my most consistent players all year. And we're going to ride him to the promised land.
And I think that's what you look for in a lot of these matchups too. Whatever you're playing them there is, the opponents are playing, and in Koo's situation, the fact that he's just kind of had that consistency all year and getting you 9 or 10 points, even if it's not a lot on some of those days, but an amount that you can guarantee every time. Whereas some kickers, they might miss a couple of kicks and then have a team that only scores a little bit. Well, Atlanta's going to score a lot anyways with the way that offense is designed. So. Koo's in a good situation to thrive there. Seattle playing the Jets, you really can't go wrong, like you said. I even like the way you're flexing the defensive player, too, with right now you got Devin White from Tampa Bay, and ranked number 3 for linebackers all year in points. He's gotten at least 7 in all of them, too. So I think when you look at matchups like that, those are points that, maybe don't seem a lot to what you're going to get with the Joneses and Kamaras and, in your case, Derrick Henry a little bit more, but those points do make a difference at the end, how many you might miss by or win by, perhaps.
I live and die by the Bill Belichick strategy, Joey. I don't overlook anything. Special teams is 1/3 of the game, and whether that goes to defensive player, kicker, or defensive special teams, it all matters, Joey. You never know. That one tackle could be the difference. And I look at it all, Joey. That's just how the Patriots do it, and that's how I do it.
There you go. You don't have any Patriots on your team this year, do you? Maybe some former Patriots. None that I see this year. That would be your team that you follow.
They're not a great fantasy option, and they are also really bad on Madden. So the only time you'll see Patriots for me is in real life.
There you go. I think with the Belichick factor too, he's definitely someone who's more a real life coach than a fantasy coach. Even when they had Brady and Gronk there, and some good running backs too. I mean, and that's okay. I mean, some football teams are designed that way a little bit more. But one thing I want to bring up with Chase is real quick, and then we can start moving on to another matchup. Christian McCaffrey, that's still a really big it factor for him right there. Right now, on his bench at the moment, projected to get 22.5. Well, still hasn't played a game in about 2 or 3 weeks. And then before that, obviously had only played 2 games in the season before that. So dealing with a lot of injuries right now. But, taking him number 1 in a lot of fantasy leagues this year, people put a lot of trust into him. I don't know what to expect out of him with Carolina just barely in the playoff picture. I mean, they'd have to pretty much win out if they want to get in the playoffs at this point.
I saw it today, but he was actually limited in practice with a new injury. So selfishly, I'm kind of hoping they just say shut it down. We're looking ahead to 2021. And if he has CMC going, then I am in a heap of trouble. So selfishly, I'm fine with him shutting it down for the year.
Absolutely.
That could be a huge difference maker in this matchup. And if anybody sees this who's not Chase and has an opinion on who I should start, Herbert or Josh Allen, hit me up on Twitter at ChandlerBats1 and let me know what you think. And that's all I have to say for this matchup.
There you go. I think that's a pretty good basis looking at that one. I think at the end of the day, you're both probably between the 2 weeks, probably going to hit somewhere between 350 and 4 would probably be that would be really, really good. 2 really good weeks for both of you. I think definitely somewhere in the 320s would be about average. But I'm expecting some pretty close matchups. You're obviously dealing with a little bit more adversity, but I think you've also got the depth going there for you. So let's go into there. I'm going to let you lead into looking into our matchup, or my particular matchup yet, with Daniel Maloney. So we got an 11-2 me versus 8-5 for the 3 seed. Just kind of want to get your initial reactions to what the matchup looks like ahead, what you're kind of looking forward to. Then we can start breaking it down position by position a little bit more.
Well, I think this is going to be a good one. You guys, I think Maloney, you've been great all year, and Maloney's really started to hit his stride towards the end of the year. And that's always, you see that in the playoffs every year. The team's been good all year versus the team that's hot. And I think that's where we're at right now. ESPN has you projected at 168 or 167.5, and it's got Maloney at 156.5. But that doesn't mean anything when it comes to real life. So let's see here. Maloney got dealt a tough blow with Saquon on the IR from like week 2 on. So that's never a great place to start.
Real quickly, and I'll let you continue, is that Barkley was actually the centerpiece of the trade that we both agreed to, like right before the season even started as well. I had decided to trade for Kamara, who I had, and then they eventually went to Chase for another trade that I made. But it's kind of a tough blow in Maloney's part right there, just not have Barkley. But the depth is obviously pretty strong from there, and I'll let you speak on that a little bit more too.
Yeah, imagine the difference, because right now his second flex is Devontae Booker. Imagine if he could have Saquon Barkley instead of Booker, the difference that would make. And then I did not prep you on this question, so I'm going to put you in the hot seat.
All right.
How do you let a player on your team take PEDs, and how do you feel about that? Because Will Fuller has been a centerpiece of your wide receiver room, and now he's sitting there with the suspended next to his name. And how did you let this happen in your locker room?
Man, I don't know. I guess I just wasn't tough enough on the enforcement or whatever, I think when it came down to it, Will Fuller took a substance. It sounded like he was trying to get the doctor's approval to do it for whatever reason. Got that, but apparently it was something that the league didn't necessarily say was legal in that case. So going to miss the rest of the season, +1 for next year. That's a bummer. He had a really big game on Thanksgiving that kind of gave me a win that I really needed there. But, wide receivers position I feel pretty confident with. It's my running backs I'm a little bit more concerned with. And we can dig into that too. But, it always sucks when you have someone get suspended or hurt at the end of the season. Maybe even more so suspended, because if they're on a roll and doing great, then all of a sudden, they're going to miss so many games. At least with an injury, they have a chance to come back. So
have you thought about releasing Fuller in order to send a message to the locker room?
It's possible. Looking at everything, I also got just to think about what I want my team to look like next year too. This might just be something where I give it a little bit of punishment and be like, hey, this happens one more time, you're cut. But right now, just maybe stick it out for the rest of the season, and we'll see where we go from there. I love Deshaun Watson, who's his quarterback, and my quarterback as well. And frankly, right now, I really don't see many people on the waiver wire. Maybe Ayuk, but other than that, for our particular league, that would have better advantages over Fuller week after week if we were still playing right now. So I don't really see much of a reason to drop him at this point, but things could change, especially if I see myself in a deficit after week 1.
All right, let's break down your roster by position. As you said, you've got good old Deshaun at the QB. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. That guy is as capable as it gets with his legs and with his arm. QB 6 on the year. And I think let's see what he did the last few weeks. He's only 33 and 31 in 2 of the last 3 weeks. Down a little bit against Indy last week, but they got out to such a big lead they could just run the ball. Let's see here.
And I like what 19 about with Indy last week isn't too bad either. Indy's got a good defense, and Chicago has good defense too. So when you can get those points right there.
Let's see. It is at Chicago. You might have to keep eye on the weather in Chicago, because you never know how that could change the game right there. Always got to pay attention to that this time of year. You don't want any
blizzard. They might get some snow this week, but
so that could change something right there. And then your starting running backs are Zeke and Carson. I did like what I saw out of Zeke last night, having Dalton back and a little bit of a rhythm. It takes the pressure off Zeke, where he's not facing 8-man boxes, because everybody knows the run's coming. And then let's see. I mean, you got Devontae Adams. What do you say about Devontae Adams? He's good for 80 yards and a touchdown at minimum every week. I watch the Packers every week, and this guy is constantly left one-on-one in the end zone, and I have no idea why. It's every week. It's him versus some nobody in the end zone. It's like, oh, I wonder who's going to win that, and it's always Devontae Adams, and that's just what happens every week.
Absolutely. And, with Adams too, having Rodgers on the career year, we say career year at about 30, 35 years old or whatever. But, he's starting to set more records this year. And Adams has always been a staple of when Rodgers is playing great, so is Devontae Adams. So you mix those two together. Green Bay obviously still in the hunt for the number 1 seed overall. They're going to have a lot to play for these final couple of weeks. Anyone who doesn't have Devontae Adams in their lineup, I don't know what you're doing at this point. But, that's been my player of the year basically right there. He's been my MVP.
He's missed 2.5 games and is still wide receiver number 2, if that tells you the kind of year he's had.
It's insane. But I guess you're going to lead into with some of the other wide receivers and have to back him up right there. Maybe not as prolific as what Chase has, but then you kind of go into some of the next ones they have for depth with Keenan Allen, Robbie Anderson, Corey Davis. Between those 3, there's been some weeks where they've been down a little bit, but consistently in the teens, sometimes in the 20s and stuff. And I think those are going to start to be some pretty big ones too to look at.
Keenan is a reception machine. And let's see, they got Atlanta. I already talked about that matchup. I love it. And for my sake, I hope Herbert peppers him with targets and good for maybe 2 or 3 touchdowns. That'd be perfect.
Oh, that would work out well for both of us this week.
Yeah, it would. And then we tied in. You've got Kelsey. What else do you say about Kelsey? Kelsey is basically starting 2 tight ends in 1 compared to everybody else. Absolute cheat code at tight end. And then
Tanyan on the bench, but I mean, I think Travis Kelce is as good as you want to get for durability.
There is absolutely nobody you should even consider starting over Kelce. It's Kelce, maybe Waller, and then everybody else, and it's not that close. And then, like you said, you talked about Davis and Anderson, who are both wild cards, but they're also capable of putting up huge box scores. Anderson's got the speed, and I think DJ Moore is still going to be out, so that'll mean more targets for Anderson. Let's see. Tell me about Zach Cunningham. Why is that your defensive player? Why him?
I've seen a lot of improvement out of him game after game and stuff. Maybe last week against Indy was a little bit tough the way that they were running and spreading the ball a little bit more, but he hasn't had lower than a 7 so far in his points per any of the games and matchups that he's had. The Texans to an extent still have a lot to play for. Maybe they're not going to get into a playoff spot at this point, but they can play spoiler for a lot of these teams at the end right here, especially Indy and Tennessee that they've got in these final few weeks coming up. I think Cunningham, too, he's setting a lot of records and tackles and stuff this week. Maybe not so much the interception machine, but kind of like Koo in your case of he's consistently going to give you 8, 9, 10 points a week. And, I mean, sometimes that's kind of a big factor that you can have in fantasy playoffs.
And then you got the Saints versus the Eagles and their new quarterback. I think that is a great spot for the Saints defense. They're good anyway, but who wouldn't want to be facing Wentz would be good for them too, but they might scare the daylights out of Jalen Hurts in his first game. And then you got Justin Tucker. What is there else to say about Justin Tucker? Except they jinxed him last night. He missed his first field goal under 40 yards in like 50-some years, I think.
Yeah, they had said that back like right before. It was like 70 straight attempts of 40-plus yards or 40 within 40 yards, and then he missed one. And it was like, great. But, Tucker is about as good as you want to get for kickers in terms of just being reliable and being ready in there and stuff. And I have him in other leagues too. He was no brainer whenever he kind of came up in the draft list near the end.
What do you think about Mike Davis sitting on your bench? If CMC gets ruled out, does he get moved into starter? Have you decided yet?
It's kind of a wait and see right there. I mean, could be something where I plug him in for Ezekiel Elliott if I don't think that he's going to be on the pace to get as many points as possible. I've also got James Conner who I might be able to mix and match in too. I know Pittsburgh's dying to get their running game going, especially after kind of being limited in the game against Washington last week. So Conner could give him a little bit of a good mix too. And then Wayne Gallman is also on the bench, coming off a couple pretty good consistent weeks right there. So I don't know the running backs right now. It seems like they're all kind of, about the same as what they can get for potential right there. Davis might be the one where I know he's starting for sure that I keep an eye on and come Sunday kind of monitor the matchups pretty closely because when he's been starting a lot of the games this year, he's been getting in the teens and Carolina likes him. They like the way that they can pass to him. They can throw. They can let him run. He's got a lot of speed, even though he's kind of a smaller running back over there. So I got a lot of flexibility at that position per se, but maybe not as much star power, which is a little worrisome heading into this matchup because Maloney's team is quite the opposite, at least for running backs.
Maloney's team is something. I'm just really taking a look at it for the first time here tonight. I mean, he's led by Mahomes. Best quarterback in the league, no doubt about it. But then it gets interesting. You've got David Montgomery, who most people consider pretty middle-of-the-road running back. But, man, he's been on fire the last couple of weeks. Looks like a completely different guy. He was averaging probably around 11, 12 points. In the last 2 weeks, 25.5, 27.1. And he got 2 touchdowns last week and 1 the week before that. So he's catching fire at the right time, just as the rest of Maloney's team is. And then the steal of free agency, James Robinson, RB2 right there. Still makes me sick that he got away.
RB1 with the numbers he's been putting up. Most of the time he's been in the 20s for scoring. I saw some stat that compared him to Barry Sanders on sort in his first couple of years too. Not really sure exactly what it was, but like whenever you be in company with running backs like that, you're doing something right. And even though Jacksonville, isn't in a good position, they're going to let the rookie run. So Robinson, I know he's going to get points this week. Montgomery probably going to get some pretty good points this week. Then from there, it's a matter of the matchups games with some of the other players he has in.
And I'm looking at Robinson's history. Monday, September 7th, added by Team Schumacher. Thursday, September 17th, dropped by Team Schumacher. Tyler, what are you doing, man? And that's how you wind up in the consolation bracket, dropping a possible league winner right there. And Maloney benefited from it. And then
he even got picked up from free agency too. It wasn't just like waiver. So I mean, we all had pretty much a chance to either put a claim or pick him up, and I guess that just kind of went where it was unnoticed a little bit. But yeah, I mean, those are the type of moves that get you into winning positions. I saw something today that Kelsey and Robinson were the two most common players owned for teams that were in the playoffs for fantasy.
Doesn't surprise me because do you know how hard it is to get an RB1 off free agency after you've already drafted? That doesn't happen, and it happened this year with Robinson.
I think if you compare it with like Kamara or Dalvin Cook or someone like that too, who's been getting points, I mean, then you basically have two RB1s. That's unheard of for a lot of fantasy teams.
And then we've got another Robinson, Allen Robinson, catching, wide receiver 11, solid as solid gets, averaging 16.5. Then you got Thielen, the White Lightning. Let's see if he can share wide receiver 9.
Playing Tampa Bay this week too. I mean, both of them are pretty good matchups where they can benefit. Allen Robinson's been a little bit more consistent in that regard this year, but I mean, I'm expecting them to get points too. I just don't know if it's going to be something where, especially in Rob still having to adjust with Trubisky.
Yeah, Tampa Bay, they really shut down the run, but they can give up the pass a little bit, especially if they're going to come in focused on Jefferson. It might open things up for Thielen a little more. So that would scare me a little bit if I were you, Joey. And then we drop down. You've clearly got an advantage in tight end, Kelsey over Goddard, but I really like Goddard. Even with Ertz back, I think Goddard is the best tight end on that team right now, and I think he'll have a chance to show it again with New Orleans this week. And then you got Robert Woods, who personally is a Patriots fan. I think he'll give the Patriots trouble tomorrow night. He likes to get on the outside on those jet sweeps and stuff, and the Patriots defense is not fast. That is one of their weaknesses. Wow, he's surprisingly, to me, wide receiver 10 this year. I would not have guessed that. So
I mean, he always gets points. His first week was 6. So I mean, other than that, I mean, he's always getting receptions, and he finds the red zone a lot too. So I think he was also part of the trade that I did with Maloney at the beginning of the year that involved Saquon too. So unfortunately on my end, I could have 5 really awesome receivers right now, but you know, sometimes you miss those.
I'm telling you, he's going to get 2 to 3 rushing attempts tomorrow night against New England because I'm sure McVay will see how slow the Patriots defense is and try to exploit that. And then it gets interesting. He's got Booker as his last flex, who was pretty disappointing last week. He was a very popular ad with Josh Jacobs out, and he had 6.5 points versus the Jets. That's just not going to get it done. I haven't officially seen Jacobs' mark for this week. Do you know if he's in or out or still questionable?
Yeah, I think he's still kind of one of those that's going to be pretty close to a game time decision. And you know, I think Booker is someone who's obviously a good veteran presence right there too. But if he weren't to play, Maloney's got at least a few pretty good options on the bench that he might be able to plug in and just see where they go from there.
And then Darius Leonard, that's a great linebacker. There's a lot of good linebackers in this group from all of our playoff teams. I think that is a big thing the playoff teams really pay attention to is the defensive players. They don't go overlooked. And then we do have an interesting thing here. He does have the number 1 scoring fantasy defense as Steelers, but they are facing Buffalo this week, who scores points. So it could be interesting if Maloney sticks with the number 1 defense, or does he try to look for a matchup on the waiver wire so he's not going up against that vaunted Bills offense right now.
Yeah, and last week they only scored 3 points against Washington too, which 3 is fine for an average defense, but like for them the expectation should be in the teens most of the time. So And maybe that's kind of what one of your things with Josh Allen too is like maybe you can play him, but maybe after coming off a loss, that'll be kind of a wait and see game time decision there on the defense.
Do you stick to your guns to stick with what got you there, or do you try something new for the playoffs? That'll be a decision Maloney has to make before Sunday. Let's see. And then Butker, another great kicker. He's not the best kicker, but Kansas City scores so many points. He's going to be kicking field goals like crazy. And
you can't go wrong.
Let's see. Nope. He does have a few solid options on the bench. He's got Juju, Mark Andrews. Kenyon Drake could be a good option over Booker maybe against New York. But New York's defense is quietly kind of pretty good. And as far as the breakdown, that's all I'm seeing. Is there anything you want to add to your matchup, Joey?
I think this is going to be one of those two where what we're looking at the end, it's going to be a lot closer. Or I think maybe after the 2 weeks, it could be a difference of about 20 points or so. I mean, whenever you're breaking down a lot of these per matchups, I think ESPN has them pretty split in terms of who should be expected to get points for both me and Maloney right now. Now, the projected total is a little bit more on my side, at least for this first week, but I think I got the advantage of wide receivers. You got the advantage at running backs. I think we're both closely paying attention to special teams. And then I think that's why from there, this could be a lot closer of a matchup than projections show. So we'll see. And I'm looking forward to the competition. I think Maloney is a good test. If you want to be a champion, you got to beat some of the best teams in there. So obviously would have to beat him first and then move on to the next two, either you or Chase for the final 2 weeks. So we'll see. Should be some pretty good competition from there.
Yeah, give me just a second, Joe. I'm getting a phone call. Yeah,
absolutely.
Not right now. I can't. I'll call you back in a little bit. All right, bye. Sorry, Joey. That was Chase's mom. I told her to call me after this, but she called me during. And be sure to edit that out, okay? Yeah, that was Chase's mom.
Shout out to Chase's mom. He's got a pretty good fantasy team, so definitely put something right there. All right, let's look at some.
I at least got to beat him in the smack talk. So
absolutely, let's look at the two constellations ones real quickly, just to make sure that
I'll go ahead and make my expert prediction on your matchup. I'm going to say, because it is a 2 week matchup, I'm going to say Joey pulls this one out by a total of 32.5 points. That is my lock of the week right there.
All right.
Which matchup are we moving on to?
Let's look at, well, first, I think you should probably explain why these matchups are pretty important here, the constellation ones, at least for what it determines for our league here.
Well, if anybody is listening to this besides the 8 people in our league, we are in what I call the Core 4 League, which we drafted NBA, NFL, MLB, and NHL, all 4 sports all at once. You can draft Mike Trout with your first pick. You can draft Russell Wilson with your second pick, and so on and so on. And I think we drafted for over 2 weeks. And I got some 8 of the best fantasy sports people I know, and it's been a blast. But we'll decide the winner by average finish of all 4 sports at the end of the year. We're going to hand out a nice trophy and some nice cash prizes, and it's going to be pretty fun. And this is our second of the 4 sports. I won baseball, not to brag, beat Joey there, runner up. And even these consolation brackets, those will still factor into your overall finish. So these games matter even if you're not competing for first place in the football.
So you could have, basically, the way Chandler's breaking it down is that you could be the champion in baseball, but if you were to get last place in football, at least for those 2, once they're done, your average finish is going to be at about a 4. So anyone who gets third place in the 2 leagues would be better than that there. So still why that's a lot to play for, because Cody and Tyler were playoff teams in baseball, or at least O'Hare. And then let's just look at that matchup first right there now after bringing those 2 up, because those 2 still they'll leave a lot to play for. So do Patrick and Tyler Schumacher. But I think we got a really interesting matchup on here on tap with Tyler and Cody. The advantages projections seem to go Tyler's way a lot, but Cody's starting to get some players that are healthy again and some young talent that'll have a lot to play for at the end here.
I like the matchup, but man, they both have that second running back position. You've got Benny Snell versus Gio Bernard. That's not getting it done. Just to be, they do have players on their bench. That's why they're starting people like that. But I do like Tyler here. Cody's starting a tight end at quarterback, and we know how that goes. Even though he's good for 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns a week, seems like Myles Gaskin, he's on his way back. I do like Cody's team, but I do like Tyler in this matchup. He's got Michael Thomas back. How do you compare Michael Thomas and DeAndre Hopkins as your 1-2 wide receivers? Doesn't get much better than that.
If he had Michael Thomas healthy for the start of the year, I think that Tyler O'Hare is probably a playoff team, or at least until the last week there.
And according to Madden, he is the best team far and away, apparently, since he didn't lose a game in our Madden sims. But that's another topic.
The interesting thing about Tyler, too, is that, both right now, I think they have some players on the bench that they could substitute and get a few more points out of that and see from there. Tyler's team, as we said, dealt with a lot of injuries. Austin Eckler on the Chargers, was out for a pretty good 8 weeks or so, maybe a little bit less than that. But he's coming back into form, too, and even though the Chargers are eliminated from playoffs, he's probably going to get some opportunities to at least give it a shot, see what he looks like as a league running back for the future. The Chargers still have a chance to play spoiler in a lot of these games, too, so that's who I'm really looking on an eye on there. Ebron, Tyler O'Hare's tight end. Ben Roethlisberger, still trust him a lot. He's, I guess you could say he's somewhat of a young veteran. He's been in the league for a few years now, but got a good identity with Roethlisberger there. I think with Tyler, too, is that he can kind of wait till Sunday for some of these matchups that he has on the bench right now and see what works best. And just be patient. I think that this one's probably going to be in his favor a little bit more. But you never know. That's the beauty of fantasy football, is that even if the projections go your way, they could slant some other way, and a player might get a 0 or all of a sudden get hurt. So
usually people have to pay me for this kind of advice, but I'm going to go ahead and offer it to Cody for free. You might want to get the Dolphins defense out of your lineup versus Kansas City this week. That is just a recipe for disaster, and I take tips on PayPal for that advice to Cody if you're listening.
Let's look at Cody a little bit more and where some of these position battles go right now. I think Ridley's probably the most talented player on his team in terms of when he has a big day, can get 30, maybe more points than that too. He's got Samuel, who's bounced off really, really good weeks since coming off the IR, and played Washington this week. Both of them still not quite. Washington probably got a little bit more to play for the division. San Francisco's almost on the elimination brink, but if they went out, Samuel's going to be a big part of that too. So I think that Cody's still a team that when you're looking at the end, especially if you make some maybe some a little bit closer look at his roster, make some substitutions, he could battle for some points there and maybe push at the end.
And I know Cody's going for it. I've talked to Cody, and he still thinks he can win the whole thing because he finished pretty well in baseball, and he likes his basketball and football or basketball and hockey teams. So no way is he packing it in and looking forward to next year. Make a few changes here, and I think he'll be right in it and give Tyler a run for his money.
Absolutely. If he can finish number 5 out of all the consolation teams too, or at least, that would be number 1 among those. I mean, after finishing number 2 in baseball, that puts his average finish at about a 3 right there. Tyler, I think, got 4 in baseball. So if he were to get 5 there, stays about where he's at, doesn't lose much more ground. So pretty important there if they both kind of want to get to the point where they're champions of the whole thing. And I think Cody's got a good team built for the future, though. Kind of decimated with injuries this year. OBJ obviously suffered an early season injury. Courtland Sutton, I think, was the first weekend he went down with the ACL. Joe Burrow, that's unfortunate. And then he's also got Tua, who, has kind of been week to week with some of the injuries he's had. But he's got a good young team for the future here. So maybe if it's not this year, it could be a year or two from now that he's definitely competing with some of the playoff teams here.
He's got Ronald Jones on his bench. It's going to be a Ronald Jones week. I just have a feeling. 2 touchdowns. I'm calling it. Get that guy in your lineup, Cody.
Yeah, Ronald Jones could definitely do some damage to the Minnesota defense there. Maybe even David Johnson to the Bears, too, after the struggles they had against the Lions last week. I mean, it's a good defense, but especially if you're saying like the weather conditions favored where it's snowy a little bit, they're going to be running a lot anyway. So David Johnson, a big rushing day there. You never know. But
Yeah, I think he's got some options there on the bench to make it a much closer than what ESPN is saying.
Absolutely.
All right,
So
you want to make your official prediction on this matchup?
let's do it. I want to say after they both make some roster changes, the projections will be a little bit closer. I'm still going to favor O'Hare in this one a little bit more. Thomas is obviously a big player to watch out for there. The Saints are still playing for the number 1 seed overall. Russell Wilson is his quarterback. We didn't even talk about the quarterbacks that he had a whole lot there. But even though he's coming off a down week against the Giants, playing the Jets this week, and then Seattle still with 4 losses, you got to be a little bit careful and probably got to win out to really secure their bid for the playoffs as well.
He's backup. He can start if he's not sold on Wilson this week. He's got A-Rod sitting on the bench, so.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong. You really can't go wrong with either of those two. Those are 2 tier 1 quarterbacks right there for sure. So I would probably goes to Tyler, but you never know. Cody, set your lineups. Make sure that if there's someone on the waiver wire who might have a bigger week, just take an eye out for them because you never know if one little move there could pay big dividends going forward.
I'm going to take Tyler by 10.5 points. That's my prediction.
That's I think that's about a reasonable projection there, at least after 2 weeks are done. So we got one more matchup also involving a Tyler, and then our friend Patrick Arch from Ohio. Now, these are 2 teams this year where you look at the records, 2-11 for Patrick, 3-10 for Tyler. Not great. Both of them kind of ran into some bad luck. Obviously, in Schumacher's situation, dropped James Robinson early without realizing that he was going to be a top 5 running back for the whole year. But both these teams struggled a little bit in baseball too. So, I mean, if they got to have good fantasy hockey and basketball seasons to try to get back into the winning competition of this whole thing. So, and wherever they can finish in football too, that'll play a big part. I mean, at least one of them's going to win this matchup here.
Would you have ever guessed that Patrick is a Browns fan? He's just starting Nick Chubb, Jarvis Landry, and Kareem Hunt this week. So I never would have guessed, but we'll see. And yeah, you're right about Schumacher having some bad luck. He's got the drop of Robinson. He traded for Mixon for me in the middle of the season, and Mixon I don't think has played a snap since. Josh Jacobs has missed some time, but he's got some pieces. Running back, and he's got Dalvin Cook sitting there in RB1. So if he gets Cooks, Jacob, and Mixon all playing, I think that could be a huge difference for Schumacher come next year. But he definitely needs to win this and improve his overall standings if he wants a shot to keep going.
The other thing I look at with Schumacher too, at least when we're getting into some of these position battles, is Darren Waller at tight end. I mean, you said it. He's basically, after Kelsey, probably the best one, and not a lot of other people come close. What makes him really good fantasy commodity for not only the tight end spot, but just in general for Tyler's team here?
Single-digit number. He became that number tight end to ever have a 200-yard receiving game, and that was good. 200 on 13 catches for 2 touchdowns, 45 points. He's a wide receiver playing tight end. He's got wide receiver speed, and he's far and away the number 1 option for Derek Carr. And Derek Carr is having a pretty good year this year. I was never a Derek Carr guy, but he's throwing the ball around and getting Waller involved early and often. He's a difference maker.
And the Raiders being about number 7 right now in the playoff spots, 7's going to get in this year with the playoff teams too. I mean, they've got a lot to play for at the end, and that's what I always look at for fantasy teams too: is which players have something to play for, and who has meaningful games left. So Waller could be someone who's in there right till the end of it, and Tyler could ride into a number 5 finish potentially. But if you look at Patrick's tight end too, he's got Hunter Henry, who's top 10. had a couple weeks where he's maybe been lower, but he can explode for some big games, especially with Herbert, and now he's got Atlanta and the Raiders going these next couple weeks as well. Their defenses aren't all that terrific either.
Anytime I see that ATL under the matchup line, that's an automatic start for me. So you love to see that, especially in the passing game. He's got old man Peterson holding down his second RB position. Somehow he scores touchdowns every week. I don't understand. You think since the Lions are rebuilding, they try to get their young guys the ball. Instead, they keep feeding Peterson, and it is what it is, I guess. But it's good for Patrick's fantasy team.
The one thing I'm looking at now with Patrick's team is the quarterback opportunities he has right here. So he can either go with Jared Goff against New England tomorrow or Jackson versus Cleveland Browns, his own very own Cleveland Browns. I don't know if there's maybe some sentimental value that's going into that decision, or at least what's on the bench right now there. But can you really go wrong with either of them in their situations here?
I think that this is an easy decision. I know you don't want the Ravens to score points on your Browns, Patrick, but Lamar is a top 10 play, and Goff is probably around 15, 12 to 15. That New England defense is really starting to play better. And then the times they played before, they really had Goff's number. They confuse him. They do different things at the line of scrimmage. And I think Jackson is a much better play, but Patrick better jump on it because, like you said, they do play Thursday night against New England. So he may be locked in with Goff unless he makes that move soon.
It's not like a Taysom Hill situation where you put a quarterback into tight end. So obviously you got to make that quickly or look at your fantasy teams well enough. The other thing I'm looking at if I'm Patrick too is that there's some wide receivers who have some interesting potential here with Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb, maybe even Henry Ruggs to an extent after a good week last week. But I don't really know who to go with here right now. His two wide receivers in the wide receiver slide, anyways, are Landry and Cooper.
Ruggs had a good game stat-wise, but he wouldn't have had a good game if the Jets weren't trying to lose and let him catch a 60-yard bomb to end the game. You take that away, and it would have been a very, very average week. But the Jets are going to be the Jets.
Absolutely, which is why if you have anyone in the Seahawks this week, you should really consider starting them. I mean, most of them are starting material anyways, but so that's where maybe he might be able to plug in one of those guys in Evans, Lamb, maybe even Ruggs, and then put him in for, like, say, a Mostert who's playing Washington, coming off a really good week, limiting Pittsburgh's running backs there. So, I think there's a lot of matchup games tier two where they can go anyway, but you just got to think critically a little bit.
I know I was hating on Goff a little bit, but I do like Patrick's quarterback situation better than I like Schumacher's starter right now, if you want to touch on that one.
Yeah, right now, the starting quarterback in Schumacher's slide just lost his job, or at least the starting job last week. That would be Carson Wentz. I don't know what's going on with Carson Wentz this season. It just doesn't seem like, he's all in there physically and mentally. The Eagles, being in the division they are right now, maybe a lot of pressure for him to succeed there. And I don't even think his record-setting contract for the Eagles quarterback has set in officially yet. So that's something that when they're weighing their future quarterback options too, and fantasy managers alike, just got to be ready for anything he might be able to do there as a backup. He's got Tom Brady on the bench too. So
I do like Brady coming off the bye. Old man needed some rest. He's probably rejuvenated, got some extra sleep. He's ready to go against Minnesota on Sunday afternoon. So he makes that move, and I think that'll definitely help his case to take down Patrick this week.
Absolutely. I'm looking at a lot of the other bench players on Tyler's roster right now. I think Patrick's got a little bit more depth in case any of his players were to get hurt. I think Tyler's got the right starters in right now. Leonard Fournette, week after week has had some good matchups, but kind of inconsistent. If Jacobs plays, you probably got to get him in, but right now it doesn't look like he's really on track to do so. So, I think with these two matchups, they're just kind of mixed bags at this point. You don't really know what you're going to get, but whenever you play players that have a little bit more consistency, the ones that have been getting the points a little bit more lately, so in Patrick's case, like the Petersons, and then in Tyler's case, a little bit more like the Tyler Boyds and AJ Brown. I mean that's where I think you're going to make the difference at the end is those right there. But the only thing we haven't really touched on with both these teams yet are their special teams positions they have here. So the defensive player, the defenses, and the kickers. Who do you like best for those, Chandler?
Let's see here. Patrick does have T.J. Watt, Chiefs versus the Dolphins, and Steven Gostkowski. I don't love that. They do play Jacksonville this week, so that is a chance to score points. And then on the other side, you've got Eric Kendricks, Vikings versus Tampa Bay. So I don't love that because Schumacher will probably put Brady in. So then you've got your defense playing against your quarterback, which is not good correlation and probably won't end well points-wise. And then Matt Prater versus Green Bay. Detroit is at home, so he will be kicking in the dome. But Green Bay does have a pretty stout defense that could keep Detroit from scoring. So like I said earlier, I think the difference between some of these playoff teams and consolation teams is the focus on these three specialization positions. And you can tell just by looking at these matchups. And Cody earlier starting the Dolphins defense versus the Chiefs. It may not seem like much, but it makes a difference in these matchups. And I definitely think there are some moves that could be made there if they really want to go for it and win this consolation bracket.
Yeah, and it might just
I really don't think I can give an edge either way.
It might just be as simple as looking at the waiver wires and seeing who's out there. I think in TJ Watt's case, I know a lot of these teams that have defensive players, have been going with the linebackers here, but he's had some interceptions, he's had some games where he's had a lot of sacks. So I mean, he's not a bad option either if you really got to go with that there. The Chiefs, I don't know about that for defense. I mean, it seems like they've kind of been letting some teams in it a little bit more lately and haven't been scoring big on the defense. So maybe look for a good streaming matchup right there. Gostkowski against Jaguars. Tennessee's still going to score a lot of points, and Jacksonville is a team that is clearly rebuilding right now. So that's a good opportunity right there to keep Gostkowski in, I would think. But you can say the same thing for Prater on Tyler's side.
Yeah, kickers are so hit and miss. It just depends on how their offense does and what kind of positions they get in. You want their offense to score points, but then if they score too many points, you're just getting 1 point for extra points. So kickers are kickers. That's what they are. That's a good way to put that. But kickers. I definitely think there's some moves to be made for the defense on both teams possibly.
And then maybe more so for the Vikings, at least for the Chiefs. If you have to go with the Chiefs, that's fine. That's not a terrible matchup right there. But the Vikings against Tampa Bay coming off a bye week and now with, Brady kind of looking for some revenge to get a better than 7-5 record and probably win out from there to try to get a good spot in the playoffs. You're Tyler or Patrick at this point. You really got to try to get the wins and hopefully get fifth place out of this to and maybe have good hockey and basketball seasons. Who do you like for this particular matchup right now? Where's your projection going for this?
I'm going to lean Tyler Schumacher, and I'm going to lean – this is going to be the closest of all four matchups, I think. I'm going to say Schumacher by 5 points.
I think that's fair once it's all said and done. I think over the 2 weeks, it'll probably be a difference of about 10. I think that Schumacher's definitely got the star power there. If any of his players gets hurt, though, he's definitely going to resort to the waiver wire. Patrick's got a little bit more of a formula where he's going with some players that are hot right now. Chubb, Landry's are coming off some pretty big weeks for a wide receiver there. Peterson's been maybe not like 2012 Peterson, but still pretty good for where he's at his point of his career. So, I think this definitely has potential to be the closest matchup for the first round out of all of them. Chandler, any final thoughts you could think of with where the playoffs are heading right now?
Yeah, we didn't mention it, but this is something I'm not a fan of, but we are going to be playing until week 17 due to a rule oversight on my part. But that will definitely shake things up come to that final matchup because week 17 is a whole different animal. What do you say we do this again next week, Joey, and see where things are after 1 week in these 2-week matchups?
Absolutely. It would be a pleasure. At least, 1 week we could see and break it down. After that, 2 weeks, we should know our opponents and who's going to be playing for the championship by that point. So,
yeah. I think we can do it for the next few weeks, once a week, just to see where we're at and then break down the finals.
Absolutely. Chandler, it's been a pleasure doing this tonight. Give us both a follow on Twitter at Joey Schneider 95. I believe yours is at Chandler Bats 1.
That's correct.
At Chandler Bats 1. All right, cool.
Tell me
So
who to start, Josh Allen or Justin Herbert. At me on Twitter.